Hello, my name is Carrick, and welcome to ICE's Christmas Assembly. Today, we're going to talk about what is the most important thing that has ever happened in history. Lots of people have been trying to figure out what the most important event in the history of everything is. It could be the creation of the internet, or the creation of technology as a whole. It could be when World War II finally ended, or it could be during World War II, when the Grand Alliance was formed, which was the key to victory. Agricultural revolution, someone might say, or perhaps an industrial revolution. Or it could very well be the creation of our planets, solar system, galaxy, or even the very universe that we currently live in, which just amazes me every time. What do you think is the most important thing that has ever happened to you in your life? Briefly think about this and share this to the person next to you. The most important thing that has ever happened to me would be when I first discovered my passion for baking. It first started by helping my mum out in the kitchen, but this slowly grew to a personal joy of mine. But it wasn't just baking cakes or cookies, but baking cookies and cakes for others. I was able to turn my passion into acts of kindness. I was able to use it to help others in need. Maybe think about what you enjoy doing and seeing if you can use that to bless others. But it's so fascinating to think about our history, to see what has really changed us. But you wouldn't think that, say, a baby born in a box from which animals feed isn't very remarkable or even important. Well, what if I told you that a moment like this could be the most important, most extraordinary thing that has ever happened and will happen? Overall, it's quite an unremarkable event. A recently married couple with a wife who's heavily pregnant arrive in a town and can find nowhere to stay. Nobody will let them in for one reason or another, so they end up in a stable. There is no nurse, no doctor, no clean hospital, but actually a very dirty floor. There is no crib, so the baby's placed in an animal feeding box. And who first visits the baby? Not family, but shepherds, sheep herders, who claim that they've seen angels and that this baby is more remarkable than anything that has ever happened. I think it's summarized well in this Christmas carol.
O little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie. Above thy deep and dreamless sleep, the silent stars go by. Yet in thy dark streets shineth the everlasting light. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight.
I'll just leave with this one question for you. What do you think is the most important thing that has ever happened?
So a clue of the most important thing in the world for me and for what Christians believe is actually something related to Christmas, and which is in the meaning of the word Christmas, which means Christ with us, that is related to the born of Jesus Christ. Well, you might be thinking, why the birth of Jesus is the most important thing in the world for me? So we will look back some years ago to help you to understand it. So if we look in the Bible, we have a guy called John the Baptist. He was born just few months before Jesus, and he had a mission that was to tell everyone about the light, and everyone would believe it because of his testimony. So you might be thinking, who was the light? The light was for who John was preparing the way. That was actually his cousin, Jesus. So also in the Bible we have the book of John, that was actually not John the Baptist, but one of Jesus' disciples. He thought that the birth of Jesus was incredibly important. He starts his book with the phrase, "In the beginning was the Word." So John wanted to bring it back to the beginning, to the creation of the earth. So just as the story of the Bible and earth started, in the beginning God created the skies and the land. So which us Christians believe that the birth of Jesus is as important as the creation of the world. So some of you might still think that the birth of Jesus is not that important, and if it was, it would affect your life in some ways. Well, I can tell you that it does affect you in a big way, so I will show you why and how the birth of Jesus gave light in many areas and ways and changing the whole world. Think about this, we are currently in the year 2022, but all of history hasn't happened in 2022 years. Well, these dates go all the way back when Jesus was born. So we use BC, which stands for before Christ, and AD, which stands for Anno Domini, which means the year of Jesus Lord our Christ. So the birth of Jesus was so important that now we measure history by it. Historically, it's also believed that the birth of Jesus was a turning point in the history of women. In the world where Jesus was born, the women, they were considered inferior, so they couldn't even speak in public in the presence of a man. But the way that Jesus treated women was revolutionary. So as a result, the early church included women, honored and supported them, giving them freedom and dignity. It's hard to imagine life without the technological advances of modern science, right? Even some incredible scientific discoveries were made by Christians. They believe since the world was created by a rational creator, using rational rules, it ought to yield its secrets to rational creatures using reason and observation. The Scottish scientist James Clerk Maxwell, he was responsible for producing the first color photo, and he was actually a Christian. Also we have Isaac Newton, who was also a Christian and was the one that discovered gravity. And another example is Blaise Pascal, that was a teenager that invented a calculating machine. So much of what is good in our lives came about because 2000 years ago Jesus of Nazareth turned the world upside down and brought light to many areas of the world. So after these facts, how different do you think the world would be if Christmas had never happened?
So we've thought about the most important things that ever happened, and we've talked about the difference that the birth of Jesus made over the last 2,000 years. But is Christmas still important today? Well, I'd argue that it absolutely is. I mean, most shops are actually closed. And how often does that happen? Almost everyone gathers together with their friends and families and celebrate. And you have a massive Christmas dinner. Take 30 seconds. What's your favourite part of Christmas dinner? My favourite part of Christmas dinner is bread sauce. Now, it might sound a little bit rogue, but I absolutely love it. I absolutely love dipping my roast potatoes in it. It only comes out at Christmas, so good. But Christmas is also amazing because you give and you get presents. I remember one year I got the most amazing Lego set for Christmas. It was a Jurassic Park-esque sort of thing. There was a tower, there was a little jeep, there were lots of little characters, and then there was all these dinosaurs around it as well. And I spent most of the whole of Christmas afternoon putting it together, and I feel like the rest of the Christmas holiday playing with it. It was so good. But why do we give and get presents on Christmas? Well, there's two reasons actually. First reason is tradition. We give and get presents because that's what happened on the first Christmas. In the Nativity story, after Jesus had been born, wise men came from the east and gave gifts to Jesus: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And we give gifts to replicate this tradition. But actually, the main reason we give gifts is the second reason, which is love. We give gifts and we get gifts because we want to show people that we love them, and people want to show us that we're loved. I mean, if you've ever gotten someone a gift that you knew they were going to love, and you've really carefully wrapped it and everything, and you get to see their faces as they open it, it's amazing. It's a really wonderful experience. Now, you might associate gift giving and Christmas more with Santa Claus than Jesus. But actually, the two stories are linked. The inspiration behind Santa Claus was a guy called St. Nick, or actually a Christian saint called St. Nicholas. He was around in the 4th century, and he was known for gift giving and being incredibly kind and being generous towards children. And what he would do was give gifts to them. And in Germany and Poland and the Netherlands and lots of countries around there, they celebrate the feast of St. Nicholas. What they'll do traditionally is children will put their shoes outside their bedroom door or outside their front door, and they'll wait for the morning. And in the morning, the shoes will be filled with little treats and presents. But why? Why did that old St. Nick do that? Well, the reason was because he'd been transformed by love. In that passage from the Bible that Matthias read in the last section, this passage written by a guy called John, well, later on it goes and it says that God came and made his dwelling among us. And one other translation would be God has come and pitched his tent in and amongst us. That God got stuck in right in the middle. And that through that, John believed, and old St. Nick believed, and Christians everywhere believe that that is the transforming power of Christmas. That through that experience of Jesus coming into their lives, that they've been transformed by him. Transformed and empowered to show love. Now, this Christmas is going to be different to a normal Christmas. We've seen the news. We know what's going on in the world. We know that things are getting more expensive, and maybe Christmas dinner won't quite be as lavish as normal, or there won't be as many presents under the tree. Maybe even it'll be a little bit colder in your house. But the promise of Christmas stays the same. The promise of Christmas is that we aren't alone. That through all things happening, that through the good times and bad times, the promise of Christmas is that God came and put himself among us, came and lived among us to show that we are not alone. That actually we are so important. That the God, the creator of the universe, came and gave his life so that we could know how important we are, and we could know that we are loved. That's what Christians believe that Christmas is really about. That's all for our ICE Christmas Assembly. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.